What's coming in 2026 is frightening, not because of rumors, not because of conspiracies, not because of sensationalism, but because the Bible, modern geopolitics, and technological advances all agree that the world is entering a historic turning point. Therefore, we must ask ourselves in all seriousness, what does Bible prophecy really say about the year 2026? What events could mark this decisive year for humanity? Will the Antichrist appear? Are we entering a clearer stage of tribulation? Will new wars break out? Will they return? Or will stronger pandemics emerge? Will we be closer to the glorious coming of Jesus Christ? Will the mark of the beast be imposed? How far will artificial intelligence go? What is really coming upon this world? While millions are planning vacations, celebrations, and new projects, almost no one is paying attention to the prophetic direction in which the planet is moving. Tensions between world powers are rising. Economic crises are deepening. Technology is advancing toward unprecedented levels of control. Global structures are changing rapidly, and the spiritual signs are clearer than ever. The Bible spoke of all this thousands of years ago, and today, 2026, is shaping up to be a year where several of these signs could align simultaneously, creating a scenario that few are prepared to face. Before we continue, I invite you to like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment. Your participation allows this message to reach thousands of people who need to awaken to the prophetic reality we are entering. Now get ready, because what you are about to hear may change your perspective on the world to come and on the role you are meant to play in this prophetic time. We began to scrutinize. To understand why the year 2026 is attracting the attention of biblical scholars, geopolitical analysts, and technology experts, it is necessary to examine the biblical picture of the end times. The prophecies do not describe an isolated event that appears suddenly, but rather a progressive process, a series of signs that increase in intensity and converge to create an undeniable prophetic atmosphere. Jesus explained this idea clearly in Matthew chapter 24, verse 8, where he said, "All these are the beginning of birth pains." The word birth pains refers to contractions. They begin mild and infrequent, but then become more intense and frequent until the final event. That is exactly what we are seeing in our generation. In this decade, especially as we approach 2026, the signs are neither diminishing nor stabilizing. On the contrary, they are accelerating. What once took decades now happens in months. What seemed impossible is now an everyday reality. Global changes are no longer gradual, they are abrupt. The renowned theologian and eschatologist John Walvoord taught that the key to the end times is prophetic convergence. This idea refers to the simultaneous accumulation of spiritual, political, economic, and technological signs that are pushing the world toward a tipping point. Many experts believe this tipping point could be reached around the year 2026. Now, having understood the global and spiritual context, we must analyze the specific signs that biblical prophecy describes for the end times, and see how these signs are taking shape in this decade. The Bible teaches that these signs will intensify like birth pains and will appear together in the period leading up to the manifestation of the Antichrist and the beginning of the tribulation. What is surprising is that many of these signs are aligning with unusual force as we approach 2026, leading biblical experts, geopolitical analysts, and technology specialists to consider that this year could mark a historic turning point in global prophetic development. Below, we present the most relevant signs. First, increase in wars and rumors of war. Matthew chapter 24, verse 6. Jesus said, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for all these things must happen, but the end is not yet." Today, this prophecy has become part of our daily news. What were once isolated conflicts have now transformed into a global map of military tension. Various strategic reports indicate that the world is experiencing its most militarized period since World War II. Analysts indicate that 2024, 2025, and 2026 will be critical years because military alliances are being reconfigured. weapons are being stockpiled, and nuclear projects are being accelerated. Tensions between the United States, Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea are escalating dangerously. The Middle East, a key region in biblical prophecy, is on the brink of a major conflict that could escalate rapidly. Israel and its adversaries are preparing for military scenarios that could shift the balance of power in the region at any moment. The prophecies never said that these wars would be the end, but rather clear signs that the prophetic process is progressing. In second place, economic crises that reflect the third horseman of the apocalypse. Revelation chapter 6, verses 5 and 6. The third horseman of the apocalypse appears riding a black horse and brings scarcity, inflation, and a global economic crisis. The Bible describes a time when food will be so expensive that a person will work all day to buy just a basic ration. Today we see troubling signs: persistent inflation in all regions of the world, national debts that have reached historic levels, shortages of basic goods in multiple countries, and fragile financial systems that could collapse. Economists from the International Monetary Fund and various financial laboratories warn that the global economic system could undergo a profound readjustment between 2025 and 2026. Some call it an economic reset, others a global reorganization event. This economic pressure coincides with the prophetic profile of the end times, where there will be inequality, scarcity, and dependence on centralized systems. Third, controlled technology that approaches the prophecy of Revelation 13. Revelation chapter 13 describes a world system where no one will buy or sell without authorization. For centuries, this seemed symbolic or impossible. Today, it is technically feasible. The technologies that could make this possible already exist: mandatory digital identity, biometric and facial payments, government-controlled digital currencies, artificial intelligence in mass surveillance, facial recognition integrated into cities, and universal databases of financial activity. Artificial intelligence has reached such an advanced level that it can now predict behavior, identify patterns, and track individuals with alarming accuracy. By 2026, these technologies will be much more accessible and widespread. Experts from the World Economic Forum assert that the convergence of human intelligence, artificial intelligence, and biometric systems is inevitable. This creates the perfect environment for a world leader to exert total control, just as the Bible prophesies. Fourth, worldwide apostasy and spiritual decadence. The Bible indicates that a great apostasy will occur before the Antichrist appears. This word means abandonment of the faith, doctrinal distortion, and rejection of the truth. Today we see churches straying from sound doctrine, lukewarm believers lacking conviction, theologies that deny fundamental principles, the normalization of sin in the culture, the growth of occultism, modern witchcraft, and alternative spiritualities. Dr. Erwin Lutzer stated, "We are living through the deepest spiritual crisis of the modern church. This spiritual condition prepares the world to easily receive the deception of the Antichrist, a charismatic leader who will bring temporary solutions but will lead humanity into total deception." Fifth, geopolitical reconfiguration before the end. Ezekiel 38, Daniel 2, and Daniel 7. According to these prophecies, in the last days, nations will reorganize themselves into strategic alliances and fragile political structures. Today we see exactly this: the rise of China as a superpower, the military resurgence of Russia, the strengthening of Iran and its regional agenda, the weakening of the United States, the growing tension surrounding Israel, and new military pacts in Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. Analysts like George Friedman say that the decade 2020 to 2030 will be remembered as the period where the world map changed irreversibly. The Bible places Israel at the center of the prophetic stage, and never before has this country been so politically isolated, militarily challenged, and prophetically active. Now it's not just an economy, but global confidence in the entire system. Political scientist Samuel Huntington, known for his clash of civilizations theory, also predicted that the 21st century would be marked by a global realignment where cultural, religious, and political identities would clash, generating new power blocks and weakening traditional alliances. This realignment coincides with the prophetic scenario in Daniel, where the end-time kingdoms would be an unstable mix, strong in appearance, but fragile in cohesion. Added to this diagnosis is the crisis of meaning that humanity is experiencing. Psychologist Jordan Peterson points out that we live in an era where millions of people no longer know who they are or what they should believe. A condition that, according to him, produces a massive vulnerability to extreme ideologies and authoritarian leadership. This identity crisis is not a sociological detail, it is a prophetic element. Scripture teaches in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 that before the rise of the Antichrist, there will be a global environment predisposed to deception, not by military force, but by inner emptiness. Another important element that distinguishes our time from all previous generations is the speed of change. Futurist Ray Kurzweil states that we are in the most accelerated decade in human history, where changes that once took centuries now occur in years, and changes that once took years now occur in weeks. This accelerated pace perfectly aligns with Jesus' comparison in Matthew chapter 24, where the final events would be like birth pains, rapid, intense, and increasingly frequent. Former NATO Supreme Allied Commander Admiral James Stavridis describes the current situation with unsettling words. The modern world operates so fast that a single wrong decision can upset the international balance in a matter of hours. This volatility is precisely the kind of scenario in which prophetic events can unfold with immediate global impact. Finally, the contemporary philosopher Byung-Chul Han warns that humanity lives in a permanent state of emotional exhaustion. He writes, "Tired societies lose their capacity for discernment." This is deeply relevant to biblical prophecy because Jesus repeatedly warned, "See that no one deceives you." A tired world is a vulnerable world. For these reasons, many researchers believe that 2026 should not be seen as a fixed date of prophetic fulfillment, but rather as a potential tipping point, a stage where accumulated pressure on global systems could trigger sudden changes that open the door to scenarios foretold in Scripture. The Bible shows that before major events unfold, the world enters a transitional phase, where the old ceases to function and the new has not yet been revealed. And that transition precisely describes the climate that is forming toward 2026. When analyzing the course of the world and comparing current trends with the prophetic patterns of the Bible, an inevitable question arises. What could 2026 truly represent? Scripture doesn't assign exact dates, but it does show that before the end times, the world enters a period of transition where human structures break down and nations desperately seek stability. Several experts suggest that this type of transition could intensify around 2026. One of the most likely scenarios is that the world will experience simultaneous crises, what economists like Adam Tooze call polycrisis, a stage where several problems occur at the same time and reinforce each other. This environment could accelerate global decisions and pressure nations to adopt new forms of international cooperation. Another scenario is the strengthening of global control and coordination structures. Reports from the World Economic Forum project that between 2025 and 2027, international agreements on digital security, health, trade, and technology will be consolidated. While these efforts aim for order, they also pave the way for the kind of system the Bible describes as preceding centralized global leadership. In geopolitical terms, organizations such as the Council on Foreign Relations warn that the period surrounding 2026 could bring significant realignments between superpowers, opening the door to a more fragile and divided world map, similar to the one described by Daniel and Ezekiel. On a spiritual level, Oxford sociologists explain that messianic movements and the desperate search for charismatic leaders increase in times of uncertainty. The Bible warns that this climate will be characteristic before the appearance of the final deception. Finally, some theologians suggest that 2026 could mark the beginning of a pivotal prophetic decade, not because of a single event, but because current trends could become more clearly defined and propel the world towards scenarios described in Matthew 24 and Revelation. Dr. Michael Brown states, "Prophecy doesn't happen suddenly. It happens when nations are already moving toward its fulfillment." For these reasons, 2026 should not be seen as a sensationalist date, but as a possible transition point, a year where the world could move more quickly towards the prophetic scenario announced in Scripture. When we analyze the current historical moment in the world, we understand why many experts believe that 2026 could mark a prophetic turning point, not because the Bible specifies a date, but because global conditions increasingly resemble the periods that have preceded profound changes in biblical history. One possibility is that 2026 will usher in a decade of global readjustments, where nations will face pressures that accelerate political, economic, and spiritual decisions. Historian Niall Ferguson points out that major shifts occur when the structure loses the people's trust. And today, global trust is at critical levels. Another scenario is the growing demand for stronger global leadership. International organizations already recognize the need for greater global coordination, and this type of environment aligns with the model of future centralized leadership described in biblical prophecy. This period may also see an increase in ideological and spiritual movements, as humanity tends to become more receptive to charismatic figures in times of uncertainty. Recent studies confirm that societies in crisis seek leaders who promise order and hope, something Jesus warned about in Matthew chapter 24. Finally, 2026 could be the beginning of a time when the world moves towards stricter global regulations, especially in technology, identity, and mobility, creating the kind of infrastructure that, in the future, would allow scenarios described in Revelation. For these reasons, 2026 is not a final date, but a possible turning point where prophetic convergence becomes more visible, and the world moves towards the scenario that the Bible foretold. We have reached the end of this analysis, but not the end of what God is doing in history. 2026 is not a warning of terror nor a mystical date. It is a mirror of the times we live in, a reminder that prophecy does not belong to the past, but to the present we are experiencing and the rapidly approaching future. The changes we are seeing are not accidental. They are signs that the world is aligning itself with what the Bible foretold thousands of years ago. Therefore, the most important question is not what will happen in 2026. The most important question is, how is your life before God in this prophetic time? Jesus said in Luke chapter 21, verse 28, "When these things begin to happen, stand up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near." This is not a time for fear, but for awakening. It is not a time for distraction, but for preparedness. It is not a time for lukewarmness, but for returning to the Word, to holiness, to prayer, and to the mission Christ gave us. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to subscribe, comment, and share it. Help more people understand the times we are living in. This was Searching, and we will continue exploring what the Bible reveals about the end times, because the world changes, but God's truth remains forever.